as what you do, not what you say. And we are looking at the BARTIMAEUS example. Today, we are best served with one of the best miracles of Jesus, which is the healing of blind BARTIMAEUS, captured so beautifully by Mark the evangelist. This miraculous episode announces at least two very great lessons. The first is it announces the fulfillment of the Messianic mission by God in the person of Christ. And then the signs and living manifestations so contained in the first reading are fully lived, and they are lived by Jesus in the gospel. And this is made possible by Christ, the high priest himself, as recorded in the second reading. The second reading puts to us not just the quality of the high priest, but the functional consideration of the high priest as one who offers sacrifices and as one who reconciles. The second reading notes that he, the priest, is a victim of what he expresses and asks for mercy. So we can see an ordinary rising that goes to something that is spiritual, as we see Jesus himself demonstrate quite eloquently. The second is that the episode reveals and flags so high the very composition of faith as action or works or what one does rather than what one says. Can we look at the meaning of faith very briefly? Faith is a command of conviction to believe in something or develop trust in someone. The stress is command. It's a command. That's the stress. Two things essentially shape and decide faith. Number one is belief. And then number two, the reasons for that belief. Now, if there is belief and there are no strength in what activates and okays the belief, then belief is useless. So what authenticates belief is the reason for the belief and the actions of the belief. Faith is faith in something or someone that is one, believable. You don't have faith in somebody you cannot trust. So you have faith in somebody or something that is believable. Number two, in someone that has great and adequate benefits that are attached to him. Number three, faith is not barren. It is both ritualistic and realistic. The two phases of faith. The first, it is what? I can't hear you. Ritualistic. And the second is what? Realistic. When you talk of faith being ritualistic, it has to do with the spiritual domain, your connection with the divine absolute. But you see, in the tie you have with what is spiritual, there is a command of generation that reflects what is spiritual very realistically. And this is where we see the power of faith. The upward movement of faith and then the downward expression of faith. This implies that faith is both spiritual and physical. Take note. And that faith cannot only be spiritual or physical, but it can be, and indeed it is, fusely spiritual, physical. So you don't think faith to be spiritual, or you think faith to be only physical. No, it is a combination of the two. At one instance, for it to be truly faith, it must be what? Spiritual, physical. And that is the power of faith. So what this tells is that the power of faith is also the life of faith. Where faith has only a power that leads without a life that guarantees, then faith cannot be faith. In fact, what reveals and guarantees faith is not belief, but the fact of belief that is the life of faith. Now, let's look at faith as what one does, not what one says. The Bartimaeus' case. The blind Bartimaeus' character of faith reveals faith essentially as action. That is, faith in what one does, is what one does rather than what one says. We are going to now look at the part of this biblical significance. Let's break it down so we have the portents that are ascribed to it. The parts in Bartimaeus' faith, texture or composition. Now, we look at him. Let's x-ray the man, Bartimaeus. He was a blind man. By his blindness, he was already the following. One, incapacitated. That means that he lacks the strength in full competition and access of life's opportunities. The reason being that every human being should have eyes so he or she could exact himself or herself. So the absence of sight for Bartimaeus by that rendered him impotent. Number two, he by his blindness already had fallen to the lowest class of society and was still to possess one grave future of a dependence. He was now at least one of those that people could term nuisance and stigmatized, equal to lepers and others of the societal misfit. In his case, he became a beggar. Bartimaeus. We are done with that. We now look at Bartimaeus' reaction to his state. You see, the joy with this man is that he was something. Another joy is that in his something that he was, he acknowledged and accepted his something. And gallantly from his something, he celebrated his elevation. What a beautiful man. And there are strong lessons here that we should glean from the action of this great man. So we look at Bartimaeus' reaction to his state. Number one of his reactions was acceptance. One of the basic facts about life that is permanently curative or therapeutic is for one to know himself, understand his or her environment, ways his or her abilities or opportunities, and then accept himself or herself and live within or who he or she is. One of the beautiful things that makes you who you should be and gives to you what you should have is the ability to do what? To accept yourself for who you are. You must, if you don't acknowledge your state, you cannot become what you should become. And that's why you discover that a good number of people live in falsehood. And because they live in falsehood, life becomes a mirage. Shadows. You think in your thought. That's why some person will tell you, Father, I see myself for a dream. If you see fine house, where I be? But for house, even Karabut. Number two of his reaction to his state was that seeking or working something out. Bartimaeus sorted for himself a trait that agreed with his state. And what was that trait? Begging. He was blind. By that, he could not do any other thing the best of the best could do. Now, but he didn't just sit redundant. He looked for a thing that who he was could be possible. To achieve this, he possibly did the following so finely. Number one, he struck a good relationship with his aides. Because he was a blind man, he depended more on people. So he had a good relationship with those that could help him. so they could take him out every day. Number two, he both identified and picked a place or position his begging trade could yield. I just see creativity. I see too much of wisdom in this man. In a dual way, you could see that. You see, there are places, certain businesses are not good, that people should establish them. This is BARTIMAEUS. He was very, very witty to have settled for that. He chose a position that his begging trade could yield. So when you're opening a business, you have to look at, you go to what we call visibility studies. You open a business where people, a business of akara, where people don't eat akara. You're wasting it. You wake up every morning, you go there, you come back. How market? I no sell. How you go sell where people no need waiting you carry? Environmental sensitivity must agree with environmental needs. There must be an agreement. He was always regular to his trade and at the place of his trade. You know, some of us can be very abysmal in our laxity. You begin an infant business. You begin to give it to people to manage for you. You are not there. Early in the morning, you go and collect one person back, shine it, and sit down on the Okada. Wang. You go and tell your boy, continue. You go back village. And then the days you go to your shop are fewer than the days you don't. All right? Today, once a particular sickness comes, you fold up. Now, this man was a regular. He never missed out. If he had missed out, you could see that Jesus wouldn't have found him at the position he did. Because he was a regular, he could have a movement that created this movement that led to not an idler, or an excuse vendor who hides under his disadvantage and seek to run other people dry. You see, BARTIMAEUS was not a parasite. No. He plied his begging trade very well, that he showed himself a judicious opportunity utilizer. Take note that Jesus did not meet BARTIMAEUS in his house sleeping. Instead, he positioned himself by the side of the busiest roads to Jerusalem via Jericho. That was what happened. Create to create. And when you create to create, allow your creativity to be relevant. If it's not, you cannot be productive. Forget sentiment. We are done with that. We look at BARTIMAEUS' recognition of Jesus. BARTIMAEUS had not met Jesus. Neither had he experienced his miraculous attitude. This is what is much more fascinating about this great man. The gospel didn't also tell us that he was briefed of Jesus by anybody. But take this, that first, he was only blind. Take note, BARTIMAEUS was only blind. He was not deaf or crippled. Though he begged, he had a family and those he could discuss certain happenings with. So, possibly strongly, people had told him of Jesus. So, with his great sense of perception, the noise of the crowd with Jesus on his way to suffering, Jerusalem, pushed him to know it was Jesus by doing these things. Number one, he asked the people, who was that or who is that? Because, listen, BARTIMAEUS had been listening and hearing noises of people. He had no sight. But at this instant, he discovered by his perception that this noise was an unusual noise. And this crowd was an unusual what? Crowd. And so he couldn't stop. People have been passing there with all their noises. He had not asked. Brothers and sisters, only men of wisdom can overcome situations. You can see Bartimaeus. When he discovered that this noise meant something, he didn't keep quiet. And he said, "Who is that?" And they told him it was Jesus. Immediately they told him it was Jesus. What the people possibly, this is a theological guess, don't quote me, but what the people possibly had whispered of him, of he that had the name Jesus of Nazareth, came alive in his senses. And he shouted, "Jesus, son of David." Take note, Bartimaeus, though he was blind, also found his place to the synagogue. So the didactic impression of the people of old were very active in him. He knew that the prophet had promised that the Messiah was going to come, and it was going to come via the line of the shoot of David. And so when he discovered that it was that, he screamed and then brought alive historical perspective. And he said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Bartimaeus' hindrance against his movement. The people both talked and clamped him down. They said, "Shut up." But he refused to be talked down and knocked out. Bartimaeus was the best number 10 player in the best league team. If he were to be in Nigeria, we would have given number 10 jersey. Because he handled the ball very well. And he saw an opportunity to score. 10 people brought him down. He said, "You cannot." He dribbled all of them. And in the end, he scored. Men of resilience can never go hungry. Men that never give up can never be put to shame. Men that believe that tomorrow can be better and never disappointed. They keep moving. These are men that we term achievers and great celebrants. I wish we take that from Bartimaeus. Glory to Jesus. And Jesus reached out to him against the attitude of the people. We conclude with this, so we take our lessons home. The true face of Bartimaeus' faith and the lessons for you and for me. Bartimaeus believed that Jesus can heal him and will heal him. I love that. Immediately Jesus said, "Tell him to come." We are told one of the best possessions that any beggar could not let go was the beggar's cloak. And given the kind of environment where you have cold and all of that, beggars were attached to their cloak. But immediately Jesus said, "Let him come." We are told Bartimaeus did what? Removed his cloak and did what? And threw it away. Why? Because he said to himself, "As I'm going, I'm not coming back. So I don't need this again. So the property that belongs to this, go away. I'm going to become something." What confirmed this is that he removed his cloak, which was a normal ritual, and then threw away. For him, that was all. Number two, he knew what he wanted. Oh, I love this. When asked by Jesus, though Bartimaeus knew that Jesus had the power to give anything, the power to give position, plenty money, and all of that, but he didn't ask for anything. He knew what he wanted. Amen? He knew what he wanted. So Bartimaeus understood that the very mission of Christ, which was to both open and turn the eyes of the people to a new world, was to begin with him. So when they asked him, what Jesus said, "What can I do for you?" And he smiled and said, "Lord, I want to see. He didn't say, give me money. He was a great man. I want to see. He knew what he wanted. And Jesus said, go your way. Your faith has healed you. Let me ask you a question. Was it Jesus that healed Bartimaeus, or the faith of Bartimaeus that enabled the healing of Bartimaeus? Are we together? What that means, therefore, is that, see, in every human being, there is this capacity to offer you something. It is there. But if you don't use it, you cannot have it. Glory to Jesus. The lessons, what I term Bartimaeus' marks. Number one, judiciousness. Every opportunity, however small, leads to great, if let put in great use, it leads to greatness. Take note of that. However tiny an opportunity is, if you use it well, it leads you to greatness. Number two, doggedness. Bartimaeus' blindness could not render him helpless or push him away to give up. The attitude of the people could not slow him down. My dear brothers and sisters, don't allow yourself to be silenced by people and their behavior. Be who you are. When they talk, when they shout you down, stand where you stand and go to where you are going to. People will always seek to distract you. It doesn't matter what they do and say. What is important is, what do you want? Learn to speak up on issues where people need to be heard. The silence by a good number of us today is very frustrating. In our families, in the church of God, in the political circle, people have become complacent and used to quietness. Nobody wants to talk, even when it's biting them. For those of you that are politicians, the issues in Cross River State are beating you hard, but you won't talk. But when they work, wow, where you should talk, it is paying when I pass us. We will day. Person when no chop. If you dey talk, you will say, "Wetin concern me?" But you wave in the chop, you no chop again. Oh. We will day. I'm an son. Make una no talk. Allow one man to pocket you people, and you're quiet. But Bartimaeus was not silenced by anybody. He spoke up his mind, and so he celebrates God's victory in his life. Take note of this. Be weary of the pretense of people. The same people that will want you down are the same people that will celebrate with you when you rise up. Be mindful of double-faced individuals in your life. They will come to you and they smile and say, "Good morning, our Oga, our friend, my But these are the same people that go out. They are killing you. That was what happened to Bartimaeus. The same people, when Jesus said, "Let him come," they said, "Shut up." Or rather, when Jesus was passing and he shouted, "Keep quiet, are you mad?" But when Jesus said, "Let him come," the people now say, "Ah, my brother,